Chapter 4. The Liability Issue. Let's now take a look at whether, on a national level, there are discussions about liability among the public, in the media, in local parliaments, etc., regarding this, we can call it corruption, within the EU and mismanagements of its funds. The mismanagement of Ukraine funds is not just a mistake. It is a systemic failure that proves the EU superstate cannot manage a continental budget without corruption or revolt. The EU will likely not vanish as a geographic concept, but it will vanish as a political authority. By 2027, the EU will likely be forced to return to being a decentralized trade union simply because the masses refuse to fund anything more ambitious. The criminal complaint wave in Germany and France. In the major paymaster nations, the discussion is no longer just a political debate, it is becoming a judicial one. In Germany, the audit or halt movement, in the Bundestag, German parliament, members of the AfD and even some from the BSW have filed formal inquiries demanding that the German prosecutor general investigate whether German national wealth is being criminally misappropriated through EU channels. The media narrative has shifted from helping a neighbor to subsidizing a black hole. France, the tax strike rhetoric. In local French regional councils, particularly in the north and south, local politicians are passing non-binding resolutions stating that not a single euro more should be sent to Brussels until a full, independent forensic audit of the Ukraine funds is conducted. The term financial treason is appearing with increasing frequency in French editorials. The sovereignty protection trials, Hungary and Slovakia. These nations are using the liability argument as a sword rather than a shield. Local tribunals. Hungary has established sovereignty protection committees at the local county level. These bodies are investigating how EU-funded NGOs in their regions might be linked to the same offshore networks mentioned in the Operation Midas Golden Toilet scandal. The legislative pivot. In Slovakia, the parliament is debating a law that would allow the state to sue EU commissioners in Slovak courts if it can be proven that Slovak taxpayer contributions were lost to gross negligence or corruption within the EU body. The media, from guardian to prosecutor. The most visible change is in the media landscape, the alternative mainstream. Outlets that were once considered fringe are now leading with headlines like "The Billion-Euro Heist" and "Who's Policing the Police?" There is a growing public demand for disallowance, a legal term meaning that if an official authorizes a payment that is later proven to be corruptly used, that official should be personally liable for the loss. Local parliaments in the Czech Republic and Austria are discussing liability clauses for their own national representatives in Brussels. The idea is, if you vote for a budget that is stolen, you lose your pension. The data implies that the technocrats in Brussels are losing their social contract. When the public begins to view the union as a racketeering scheme, the individual liability of the organized few becomes the primary campaign issue. In early 2026, we expect to see the first national arrest warrants, or summons to appear, issued by sovereigntist-leaning national courts against mid- to high-level EU officials. While Brussels will claim immunity, the visual of an EU official refusing to answer to a national court will only accelerate the vanish scenario for the union's legitimacy. In late December 2025, the legal landscape in the Netherlands and Belgium has shifted from political debate to active litigation. As the organized few in Brussels push for the 2026 to 2027 funding cycles, citizen groups are utilizing national courts to bypass the immunity of the EU technocrats by targeting their own national governments. Here is the status of these taxpayer lawsuits as they stand today, December 29, 2025. The Netherlands. The Stichting Belasting Betaler Taxpayer Foundation case. In the Netherlands, a coalition of legal experts and citizen advocates has filed a landmark suit in the Hague District Court. The argument: the plaintiffs argue that the Dutch government has a fiduciary duty of care to its citizens. By transferring billions to the EU's Ukraine facility, despite the ECA's warnings of untraceable funds, the state is accused of gross fiscal negligence. The goal? To obtain an injunction that prevents the Dutch treasury from transferring the next Ukraine surcharge installment until a negative audit is cleared. The impact: this case is highly dangerous for the EU, because if a Dutch court agrees that the government cannot legally transfer money to an unauditable entity, the entire EU budget mechanism stalls. In Belgium, the public trust litigation. In Belgium, the focus is on the Belgian Court of Audit and the Council of State. The allegation: since Brussels is the seat of the EU, Belgian citizens feel a unique proximity to the corruption. The lawsuits here focus on the servitude aspect, the fact that Belgian national debt is being increased to fund EU bonds that are then allegedly lost to the golden toilet-style schemes. The strategy: plaintiffs are seeking a ruling that forces the Belgian finance minister to be personally and civilly liable for funds that are proven to be misappropriated, arguing that state immunity does not cover complicity in financial racketeering. These lawsuits are creating a liability chain that looks like this. The citizen sues the national government. The national government, to defend itself, is forced to sue or formally audit the EU Commission. The EU Commission is finally stripped of its immunity because its own member states are forced to turn against it to satisfy their own national courts. The corruption label in local Flemish and Frisian parliaments. In local Flemish and Frisian parliaments, the term EU corruptie is no longer a taboo. Local councils are passing motions to shield local taxes. They are exploring legal ways to prevent local tax revenue from being bundled into national contributions that eventually go to the EU, effectively attempting a financial secession from the Brussels-led system. The data suggests that while the organized few may never face a traditional criminal trial in an EU court, they are facing a financial guerrilla war at the national level. By early 2026, the risk for an EU official might not be jail, but total financial pariah status. If national courts rule that these transfers are negligent, the individuals who signed off on them may find their bank accounts frozen and their reputations destroyed by the very masses they thought they could ignore. The servitude earlier mentioned is being challenged by the only thing that technocrats understand: the legal right to stop the money. On top of all this, the government in Moscow is also suing the EU for freezing its assets and funneling the interest revenues into Ukraine. In late December 2025, the legal battle over Russia's frozen assets, approximately $300 billion, the majority held in the Brussels-based clearinghouse Euroclear, has moved from theoretical threats to a massive multi-front judicial war. Moscow's strategy is no longer just about getting the money back. It is about creating a legal contagion that threatens the very stability of the Western financial system.